Welcome to the Brainiate Show, where we talk about all things Salesforce, sharing the coolest features, solutions, and best practices to turn you into a Salesforce rockstar. Here's your host, former attorney turned Salesforce consultant, trainer, and MVP, David Giller.
In my inaugural episode, I sit for a chat with Salesforce MVP Eric Dreshfield. Eric shares his experience getting introduced to the world of Salesforce to become a Salesforce User Group leader for Southern Indiana and founder of the infamous Midwest Dreamin regional Salesforce event. Eric shares some fantastic insights on learning the Salesforce platform and tips to help you become a Salesforce rockstar. Eric Dreshfield, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
David, thanks for having me on here. I'm doing really well, thanks. How about yourself?
I can't complain. Very excited to kick off this podcast, and I am thrilled to have you as the first guest on the podcast to chat about all things Salesforce. And as we chatted about earlier, before I hit record, the goal of the podcast is really to share tips, tricks, hacks, success stories, maybe horror stories if there are any with the community, so that folks can benefit from any of the knowledge that not only I, but the guests that come onto the podcast have to share. And I know you have a wealth of knowledge that you can share.
Well, I have been in the ecosystem since 2009.
Cool.
So I guess I'm no longer a rookie.
Yeah, same here. So tell me, how did you first get involved with Salesforce as a tool, and what were your first impressions of Salesforce?
So like a lot of people, I sort of stumbled into the ecosystem. I went through what probably could be described as a messy divorce with a previous job, and that started me down this path of 2.5 years or so of not having what most would consider a real job. I wasn't technically unemployed, but I was underemployed, as I like to say. I went from a really good salary at a really good job to struggling to find work, doing contract jobs as I could find them that were really good money, and then literally working as much as 20 hours a day, sometimes between 2 or 3 different part-time jobs, one of which included unloading trucks at a retail store. That was interesting, shall we say, but it was great for my body and my physique. It got me toned and into shape. And,
I can imagine.
It caused me to drop a lot of weight, competing with a bunch of teenagers for the work there is what it felt like. But that really had nothing to do with Salesforce.
Right.
But through that process, I ran across a job ad, believe it or not, in the newspaper. Back then they used newspapers to advertise jobs. And I know some of our listeners are now thinking, what's a newspaper? But I saw this ad, and they really were just looking for somebody who was good on computers, had a lot of tech-savvy background, and because this particular company was looking for tech support agents for their own software. So I submitted the resume, got a phone call one afternoon. It was actually a Sunday afternoon from the recruiter that basically said, can you be at this office at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning for a 45-minute to an hour-long job interview plus some skills testing? And if the manager likes you, can you start immediately?
All right.
And so I sort of looked at my schedule with all the other work I had going on at the time, and I thought, yeah, I could manage to do an 8 to 5 thing for a while. And they told me right off the bat, this is probably an 8-week assignment, but the money was really good, so I was more than willing to give it a shot. So I went in for this interview, took their skills test, and the manager came back after a few minutes of testing out or of grading that test and said, we've never had anybody score 100 on that test before.
Wow.
And then she says, until now. And I said, so do you want me to stick around? And she said, yeah, we'd love to offer you a job. And so we talked for about a bit, and 20 minutes later or so, 3 other people showed up, and the 4 of us got 3 days worth of product training, and then we were live on the phone supporting this company's rollout of one particular software product that they were introducing. And the call volume was way slower than they anticipated. A lot less people had issues with it, so that 4 quickly became 1, which was me. The 8 weeks that they told me I was going to be there for came and went, and I was still there. And they kept training me on more products, so I was by the time I had been there about 4.5 or 5 months on this 8-week assignment, I was supporting their entire suite of products, which was great.
Wow.
I mean, I enjoyed the work. It was fun. I was talking to people all over the country. Even though everybody I talked to had a problem with their own systems, I was still having a blast because I was solving problems and helping them out.
Yeah.
After about another month or so, I get this random email from the director of the call center that has an Excel spreadsheet in it. And it just simply says, take a look at the data in this spreadsheet and tell me what you see. And I thought, okay, this is weird. So I did what I did and looked at it and said, okay, here's my interpretation and here's what I think's going on. And then she said, what if I told you the columns represented this and the rows represented this? And I said, okay, there's a different spin to it. And so I gave her my analysis, and she said, okay, thanks. And I still didn't have a clue what that was about. And then about a week later, I get a phone call from someone in the HR department at this company saying, hey, we've got a position that's getting ready to be opened up as a business analyst, helping the company roll out Salesforce to the call center that you're now working in. Are you interested?
Mm-hmm.
And my response was, what's Salesforce? Never heard of it. It's sort of like putting your own foot in your mouth and shooting yourself at the same time. But the response back I got was, we're not worried about that. We think you've got the skills that are needed to pick it up quickly and to help us out.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you've got great call center skills, and you really know how we operate our call center. And that's the main focus of the new role initially, is to get the call center up and running on Salesforce.
That's awesome.
We had a few more conversations, and then I got hired, transferred over, if you will, from the temp position to the permanent business analyst role.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my introduction to Salesforce. It was like, here you go. You now have a login. You need to understand our data structures and start building reports and talk to the management of the call center to find out what they really need, which I already knew because they were literally rating me on all that stuff during my monthly process of being with them still. So it was all first call resolution, average call time, average handle time, the wait times, and the usual call center metrics. So then I had to create all that stuff in Salesforce so they could manage that process and track all of the calls coming in to all the agents. And there were, across the 3 lines of business back then, there were probably 35 or 40 agents in 2 different offices around in the country. We were using Salesforce. We were also using InContact as our soft phone back then. So we had the plug-in to deal with and the screen pops to let the agents know who was on the line and those kinds of things. So that got me started in Salesforce. And one of the first things that my manager said when I got into that role was, you need to find a user group to learn, to make some contacts and learn some things and gain some more knowledge. And she said, unfortunately, we don't have the budget to send you to any official training. So you need to pick up as much knowledge as you can organically on your own. And so she pushed me down this path, if you will, of going to user group meetings, which there wasn't one close to me. Just coincidence, the first one that I was able to discover was in Chicago, and it was happening the same day as what they now refer to as world tours. Back then, I think they called it customer success tours or something like that. This would have been like back in late 2009, early 2010. And so I spent a whole day in Chicago soaking up the platform, drinking from the fire hose, as some would say, meeting the user group and meeting a lot of great people there, like Denise Carbone, who still runs the user group up in Chicago. And I did that tour, if you will, of going to user group meetings all around the Midwest for a good 6 months or so, spending a day and a half every month driving to another location to go to a meeting. Finally thought, this is really kind of silly. I can't be the only one in Southwest Indiana using Salesforce. So I made that comment to someone at Salesforce, and they did a little digging and came back and said, there's 65 or 70 people and a handful of companies in your area that are using Salesforce. And by virtue of you asking what it takes to start a user group, you just volunteered to lead one. And I thought, okay, I guess I could do that. I don't know everything there is to know about Salesforce as a platform, but sure, I can get people together to have conversations.
Uh-huh.
I seem to be good at that. So let's start this user group. So I did, and that was 2010 when I kicked off the user group. When Dreamforce time rolled around in 2010, the company that I was working for didn't have enough budget to send everybody that really wanted to attend. They felt like senior management and the more technical people needed to go, so I was left home manning the fort and keeping things running while everybody was at Dreamforce.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of missed that experience, and that's ultimately what led me to start the conference that I now lead and have been doing for a while called Midwest Dreamin. Basically, it was selfish reasons because I couldn't go to Dreamforce the first year I was in the platform. So Midwest Dreamin was born in 2011. It was a full day of content in Louisville, Kentucky. Had a bunch of stuff going on as an admin track, and then I actually managed to convince Josh Burks, who was a developer evangelist at the time, to come in and do a full day intro to Force.com developing as well. So it was pretty interesting. It was a lot of effort on my part to get it rolling, and the one thing that I will have to say is that I quickly discovered organizing and leading an event like that is the wrong way to be able to learn anything about the platform and the product you're highlighting.
That's right.
Because
It's a job
too
in and
much
of
time
itself.
running the event.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how many people did you have at that initial Midwest Dreamin event?
That year there were about 100 people, which I thought was a huge success. I didn't know what to expect, and it seemed like people just kept asking about it and wanting to know more, and finding some sponsors to cover the cost of the event was really pretty easy.
Right.
So since then, the 2 years after that, things just didn't work out for me to be able to hold the event, either too much going on job-wise or conflicts with other Salesforce events that were about to happen. And I didn't want to compete with the mothership for an event, so that would be within a few weeks. I didn't think that was a great idea. And so in late 2013, I thought, let's bring this thing back to life. Everybody kept asking me about it. I still got a lot of people saying, hey, when are you going to do another Midwest Dreamin? So at the end of 2013, I got in touch with a couple of the user group leaders in the Midwest and said, hey, I got this crazy idea that I did in 2011. I want to bring it back to life. Who wants to help? And everybody raised their hand. I had Denise Carboni from Chicago and Andy Ognanoff from Wisconsin, Lena Hofer from Minnesota, and a couple of other people saying, ooh, pick me, I'll help. And so we pulled this thing back together, created a plan, built sessions, and got sponsors and did the whole thing again in 2014, and had 500 people show up for this day-long event in Chicago.
There you go.
And it was pretty amazing. I got Peter Coffey to speak that year, the first real year for Midwest Dreamin, if you will. And it was a pretty quick conversation I had with Peter. I think it even just happened through Twitter, where I just kind of pinged him one day and said, hey, what's it take to get you to come speak at a giant user group event? And his question was, how many people do you expect? And I think I told him 350 to 400, and he said, tell me when it is, and I'll see if I can work it out.
Sweet.
And that's all it really took. He certainly won't speak at smaller events, I wouldn't think, because it wouldn't be worth his time and effort. But he's been speaking at Midwest Dreamin every year since then. Everybody seems to really enjoy hearing him talk, no matter what he talks about, and sometimes the topic is a complete surprise, even to us, until the last minute, which really I think is fantastic. And Peter can literally talk about anything and make it interesting.
Awesome. He's absolutely awesome.
Yeah. So he will be speaking again at Midwest Dreamin this year, which is August the 10th and 11th in Chicago again. We're at a new location this year. The past 3 years it's been Navy Pier.
Yep.
But we're trying out a new location this year for a couple of reasons. Primarily because our favorite dates were not available at Navy Pier this year, but they are also beginning construction sometime in 2017 at Navy Pier because they're building a hotel there, so some of our room space would not even be available this year. So we had to kind of look for a new space because of the space constraints more than anything else.
So where is Midwest Dreaming going? Do you have a place, a destination for this year?
Yeah, we do, and actually it was just announced a week ago or so officially. I think we leaked it a little while earlier.
Okay.
It's going to be at the Palmer House Hotel this year, which is still in the heart of downtown Chicago. It's about a mile or so from the lake, so pretty convenient location for those who are working in the downtown area, and still pretty easy to get to for other people around the Midwest who choose to join us for the event. And the space is really, it's a good location. It's a good layout, pretty decent space for us, and we're in the process right now of planning out the logistics of the number of sessions we're going to be seeking and those kinds of things. So
very exciting.
That'll all be coming out pretty soon.
So if some of our listeners want to RSVP for Midwest Dreamin or find out more logistics, details, costs, benefits, where should they go?
So we have a website, midwestdreamin.com. We have a group on the Salesforce Success community, Midwest Dreamin. And then you can also follow us on Twitter at Midwest_Dreamin. And those will be your primary locations to stay up to date.
And I will put those links in the show notes, by the way, for easy access for everyone.
Good. Awesome. We're hoping to get registration opened up within the next couple of weeks or so. Even though the event's not till August, we know there's people out there wanting to register already and get it booked on their calendars. So we're working on getting that up and running very soon.
What do you estimate attendance to be at this year if you had to pick a number?
Last year we were close to the 800 mark.
Wow.
So I would love to say we'll hit 1,000, but I think that's really optimistic. There have been a lot of new Dreamin type events popping up since last year. So I think some of our crowd may be limited as to where they can go and what they can attend. And we had people at Midwest Dreamin last year from, I want to say, like 30 to 35 states of the U.S. So people didn't just come from the Midwest. We had people from California. We even had a few people from outside the U.S. who attended last year.
Wow.
So it's there's more competition, I guess you could say, for people to come to these Dreamin events. So optimistically, I'd say we'll probably see 850, maybe 900. I'd love to see 1,000 just to see if we can actually get it that large. But
very impressive.
Part of me's scared of having it that large too.
Right.
To see what would really happen.
It's a big project.
But I mean, I would be happy if we had the same attendance as last year, because that was a really good number and it worked well.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, congratulations on taking Midwest Dreamin from a small little regional get-together to a rather significant event, and even more so having people like Peter Coffey as regulars. That's very impressive. That's great stuff.
Thanks.
Very cool. So let's talk a little bit more about Salesforce as a platform. And if you could share with me some example of how you leveraged Salesforce to solve a particular business problem.
Okay. So in my previous role, I was basically functioning as a reporting analyst. So most of what I did was building reports and dashboards to solve specific business needs for the various business units that I was supporting. And within the organization, the internal processes basically were, I was allowed to do whatever I wanted to in the sandbox, create new objects, create new fields, build the formulas, test it all out, make sure everything was working. I started in the sandbox every time I was doing anything. And then when I got to the point where I was happy with everything, then I would tell the Salesforce admin on the team, hey, this is ready. Here's everything I built. These objects, these fields, these reports, these dashboards. She would then package it up into a change set and port it over to production. That went on for a year and a half or so at that role. And at one point, finally, she said, you know how to do change sets, don't you, Eric? why don't you just go ahead and package everything up when you're happy with it and you've tested it and poured it over to production on your own?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, I've heard of change sets. I know what they do, but I've never built one.
Right.
I never had done that before. So back by then, Salesforce had started Trailhead. So I went out to Trailhead and discovered, hey, there's a module for this.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked through the Trailhead module on change sets, figured out how to do it, and then turned around and did it for real on my sandbox and production data, and everything worked just fine. So it's easy. I mean, Trailhead's a great source of knowledge. There's a lot of modules out there to help new users or even experienced users figure out how to do something if they've never done it before.
It's absolutely true. You know, I'm constantly amazed as to how the resources that are available online, whether it's Trailhead, the Success Community, the Power of Us Hub for nonprofits, Google, YouTube, just a wealth of resources to find, whether it's troubleshooting or to learn new skills or learn about new features. And it's just, I'll use the word magical. 'Cause very often I find myself struggling with a feature that I have never used before, just like you described with regard to change sets, and someone will ask me how to roll out a certain feature, and I'm like, I'm cringing. I've seen some videos, but I've never really done it. And and then all it takes is a quick search. So it could be a Trailhead module, and all of a sudden you feel like a total pro, and you look like a champion at work. Rightfully so. I'm not trying to be facetious when I say look like. You become a champion at work, and it's an awesome feeling. It's empowering, and it's magical. It's somewhat magical. Good for you.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
And, you know, sometimes it's on the simplest things. It's where it's not even a complicated piece of functionality, where it's something simple like a formula field or a trigger, or even just learning how to create a report of a certain type to display the data in precisely the way the business needs, where it's nothing that is even close to being developer type of work, or even what the traditional Salesforce admin type of work. And it's just, it can really transform the way people and organizations use the platform, which is great.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's probably one of the greatest things about the platform itself is how flexible it is and what you can do with it. I mean, there's, between the platform and all the various apps on the App Exchange and all the partner companies, I'm not sure there's anything you can't do with the platform.
Right. Yeah, I find it funny every time someone asks me a question, the following question, they say, well, tell me what the tool can do. Tell me what Salesforce can do, and then I'll figure out from that what I'd like to leverage. And I often tell them that's sort of like walking into Home Depot and telling me, what can I build here from the tools that are in Home Depot? Well, it's practically whatever you can imagine. So
true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that is true.
So you shared with us a little bit about your involvement in the local user group community and becoming a user group leader and becoming the chair for Midwest Dreamin. All awesome, very impressive. I know as a user group leader myself, incredibly rewarding, while at the same time it is a lot of work. But there are a lot of people who are out there, and I'm sure many listeners, that have never attended a user group event. They have no clue what they could anticipate might transpire at a user group meeting. Is it sort of like an Alcoholics Anonymous, or is it like a networking event where they really don't know what... because they don't know what to anticipate, they sort of brush it off and feel, maybe it's not for me. So could you share a little bit of insight of the things that you've seen, whether it's as in your role as a user group leader or just even witnessing some of the interactions that happen within the user groups, to shed some light for those who have never even attended a user group meeting on what the user groups are about and what they can expect and whatever else comes to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So my very first experience, like I mentioned earlier, was several years ago in Chicago. And I walked through the doors and found the meeting room and was immediately greeted by a handful of smiling faces asking my name so they can get me checked in and hand me my name tag.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very welcoming environment from the instant I set foot in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people in there, lots of conversations going on, a lot of smiles and happy talk going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that immediately made me feel good about making the 5-hour drive to Chicago to go to that meeting, which was great. And the family feel, if you will, of the community hasn't changed since. And I mean, in fact, it's probably gotten stronger because that's one of the best parts about the whole community, I think, is the people and the connections you can build. And you never know when you're going to be talking to a future colleague or a future coworker or a future boss or anything like that. But for the people who have never attended before, in addition to the value of the networking aspect, the user group meetings always share great information about new releases that are coming up, new features that are getting ready to be released, or even things that are coming up that are going to be a pilot program that somebody might be interested in participating in. Several of the user groups that I have attended also tend to feature a partner every meeting. So they have a speaker come in from one of the other partner companies, and they'll talk about best practices on how to onboard new users or how to manage a purchasing project or anything. I mean, everything you can think of, literally. And with the partner apps out there through the App Exchange, the user groups is a good way to get an introduction to some of what those apps can do. Because a lot of times, in addition to the education you get from the speakers, they'll spend a few minutes demoing their own product.
Right.
And that really is an eye opener in my opinion. And that's one of the things I like about Dreamforce too, is that the vast knowledge that you can gain by being there and by watching so many different things. It's one of those, you don't know what you don't know until you see it.
That's right.
So that's a big benefit from the user groups, I think, not only because of partner speakers and demos of products, but just conversations with some of the other people attending. They may be struggling with an issue that might be identical to the same issue you're struggling with. And between the two of you and a handful of other people at the meeting, you both could have your problem solved within an hour just by talking about it. So it's great for that. It's a phenomenal educational tool. It's probably the best way to put it.
That is absolutely true. You know, it's funny, when I used to be at GE, I was at GE Capital, and I was on a very, very small team that was responsible for Salesforce. And every year when we went to Dreamforce, I used to spend quite a bit of time just walking around by the expo area, checking out all of the booths and watching as many demos of different products as humanly possible. And many people would ask me, like, why am I spending that much time by the booths? And no, it was not to collect the swag. But basically, I turned to them and I said, well, by me sitting there and watching demos of tools that solve problems that have not even come up yet at the office, it empowers me dramatically, because 6 weeks later, 6 months later, someone might bring it up in the topic of conversation saying, hey, by the way, we're interested in doing XYZ in Salesforce. David, do you have any clue whether or not it's even possible to do that? And that's when my face lights up and I'm like, yes! And not only do I know for certain that it's possible, I can rattle off the name of 2 or 3 or 4 different app vendors that have a solution for it. And that's, again, very empowering. And just having that knowledge is fantastic for anyone who really takes their role seriously as it relates to being within the Salesforce platform. So I agree with you 100%.
Absolutely. And that, I mean, that's a great segue into how I got to Aptus. And why I'm now working for Aptus and have been here just a little over a year now. I saw a demo of their product. it was late. It was Dreamforce 2014 when I first saw Aptus in action. I guess that's not entirely true now that I think back a little further. Aptus was one of the sponsors of Midwest Dreamin 2011.
There you go.
So I saw some of their quote to cash stuff way back in 2011. But they did a special session the day after Dreamforce for MVPs and user group leaders in 2014 and gave us a kind of an inside tour of quote to cash. And then they also showed off the XAuthor tool. And quote to cash was cool. It was interesting. But XAuthor was the thing that just kind of blew my mind away.
Right.
And I immediately started coming up with hundreds of use cases on what XAuthor could do for an organization. And if you're not familiar with XAuthor, it's essentially Excel, Microsoft Excel as a front end to Salesforce. So it combines the best of Excel, all the features, functions, automation tools that you can use within Excel with Salesforce. So
Sweet.
for a quick example, like if you're a sales rep and you need to update your opportunities, in Salesforce you do it one opportunity at a time on the browser. It takes a couple of minutes to pull up the opportunity, change your stage, change your amount, save it, and move to the next one. With XAuthor, you build an app, which someone who has the knowledge and has done it a little bit in the past could probably build an app to pull up opportunities within 15 to 20 minutes. Once you've got the app there, it's available for anybody in your organization. You go to the app, you filter down to the appropriate opportunities, and then you're seeing every single opportunity that meets your criteria on the screen at once. So you can just simply go row by row by row, update the dollar amount, update the stage, put in some comments, just like an Excel spreadsheet, do whatever you want to, hit save, and your Salesforce org is updated instantly, every single record with all those changes you just put in.
Very sweet.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah, I mean, and you can add records through XAuthor by inserting rows into the spreadsheet. But the whole while, it's enforcing all of the access rights and security that you have within Salesforce. So if you're a sales rep and you only have access to the central territories, if you try to do something in the North Territory, it won't let you. You'll get an error message saying, sorry, you don't have the rights. So it's not just Excel, it's enforcing everything that Salesforce has to offer from a security and access right control as well. So it's a pretty amazing tool. And that's really what got me excited about wanting to come work for Aptus and ultimately led me to being here now.
And what's your current role at Aptus is what? Your focus is?
I am part of the marketing department, and they refer to me as an advocacy manager, which is an interesting title. I mean, a lot of times when you hear advocacy, you think of people who deal with the customers, trying to make sure the customers understand what they're getting, and it's almost like advocates are on the customer side as opposed to the company side. But my role is a little bit different than that. I kind of play more a role of the educator and the connector. I write a lot of content for Aptus, blog posts and things like that, and my main focus is trying to make sure that potential customers understand the value of Aptus products and what it can bring to their organization, and current customers realize there's more to Aptus than what they're currently doing with it. So there may be upsell opportunities. I'm not a salesman. I don't get paid commission.
Right.
So everything I'm doing is educational and trying to enlighten people on what the possibilities really are. And I do that, like I said, through blog posts, through white papers, through social media, and sometimes through attending regional events like Midwest Dreamin. I'll attend some of those other events, and I'll be the guy standing at the booth, representing Aptus, answering questions. Sometimes I'm there more as just an attendee, but I'll still have the bright green Aptus classic shirt on, so people recognize me. And if they have an Aptus question, I'm sure not going to turn them down, and I'll be glad to talk to them about it then as well.
That's great. Very cool. So the next question that I have for you is, of all of the different apps that are available on the Salesforce App Exchange, which two are your favorite?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't mention X-Author, and I think I've already pretty well explained the reasoning for that one.
And by the way, I'm going to include a link to X-Author in the show notes for the podcast as well. But go ahead.
Okay. So I think there's a whole bunch out there that are really great apps, and it depends on what you're wanting to do as far as which ones are appropriate and favorites, if you will. But the other app that I have the most experience using personally, so I guess I could classify that as my favorite, is Form Assembly. And Form Assembly lets you build web forms very easily. It's pretty much drop and drag and key in your text wherever you want it kind of thing. But they have a really easy connector to Salesforce, which allows you to tie the form directly to your Salesforce org. So as your customers or your prospects or your survey takers or whoever is accessing these forms you've built, once they complete the data in there and hit the save button, their data is already in your Salesforce org. It's created an opportunity, or it's created a lead, or whatever, however you wanted to store it. On my own personal side, the blog series that I've had going for around a year or so now, the Kevin Bacon of the Salesforce ecosystem, right within my introductory paragraph of the blog, every time I put it out there, there's a link to a form that people can fill out to tell me about themselves, so that maybe I will feature them in a future episode, and that I use Form Assembly tied to my dev org.
Sweet.
So it's a real-time use for me with the blog. But also in the past 2 years now, I've had the privilege of being able to auction off a pass for Dreamforce, and the benefits of that going to charity, supporting my favorite charity project, Night Night. And I've built the auction process through Form Assembly and run it from Form Assembly into my dev org as well to track all that data.
That is very impressive. Good for you.
Yep. Drinking the Kool-Aid, right?
Yeah. No, it's great stuff.
Yeah.
You're proving that the old adage of the shoemaker's kids are walking around barefoot, that's wrong. It's not always true.
Yep, that's so true. I mean, it's such a great tool. Why wouldn't you use it for things like that? I mean, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I'm totally with you.
The heck out of just writing things down on paper all the time.
Absolutely. Yep. So tell me, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who is relatively new in the world of Salesforce, what piece of advice would you share with them, and why?
I think if I was to boil it down to one quick statement, I would probably have to say stay curious. And what I really mean by that is kind of twofold. Don't be afraid to spin up a dev org and just try something. You're in a dev org, you're not going to kill anybody's production data. And then be curious enough to talk to people when you're at events, whether it's a user group meeting or Dreamforce or wherever, any kind of Salesforce related event. Turn to the person next to you, introduce yourself, ask them what they're doing with Salesforce, how long they've been on the platform, because that's another connection. It's another foot in the door, if you will, to more knowledge. And there is a ton of knowledge out in the ecosystem. I don't think there's anybody there who knows everything, although there are a lot of amazing people in the community who share tons of knowledge through the community, through the Answers Forum, through Twitter, you name it. But staying curious and being open to learning will help you go far.
I couldn't agree more. It's funny. A lot of people turn to me and they'll say, "Oh yeah, you know everything about Salesforce," and I'll answer them saying, "No," and I'm not being humble when I say, "No, you're wrong." It's almost impossible to know for any one person to know everything about Salesforce. There are so many new features coming out on a regular basis. There are so many new companies and products that are folding into the Salesforce umbrella and becoming part of the product line. And there are so many use cases by even leveraging functionality that has been around for quite a while, so many creative use cases, and to use the same tools but in more sophisticated yet more simplistic ways, that it is impossible for any one person to really be deep in the knowledge of all of it. So I agree with you 100%. You really need to stay curious and to constantly be open to learning, because as soon as someone has the mindset of, no, I know everything that I need to know and nothing further is necessary, well, they're going to have their head in the sand when new features are being rolled out, when new apps are being rolled out, when people are blogging or creating videos showing how they're using the existing platform to solve the business problems that they are struggling with. And to your point, they won't go to the user groups, or even if they go to the user groups, they won't talk to the people next to them who might be sitting on the solution that they've been looking for. So
absolutely, yeah. And I very openly admit to people when they ask me questions, I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
I say that a lot, but usually I follow it up with, but I think I know someone who can get you that answer.
Right.
And that's kind of one of the little parts, I guess you could say, of my personal brand, where I seem to know everybody in the community.
Right.
And if I've been teased about that a few times, and it was really a funny conversation that I had with Lori Witzel from Spanning Backup.
Mm-hmm.
Probably 2.5 years ago now. We were just chatting about one of the issues she was trying to solve, and she said, "Do you know the answer?" And I said, "No, but so and so does. Talk to this person." And she immediately said, "You're like Kevin Bacon." She said, "You know everybody." And my mind immediately went, "Pop, there's a blog series right there."
There you go.
And that's what started that whole blog series of me just simply introducing people in the ecosystem. But I mean, that is literally probably the greatest strength of the whole ecosystem, is everybody that's in it.
Yes.
I mean, there's between the wealth of knowledge that the MVPs and the user group leaders have, between all the blogs that are out there by everybody who writes them, between that, the videos. I mean, Shell Black has a great video series that he's been producing for a while on how to do things. I mean, even that and all the other great assets that you can find through searching, you can get most of your answers that way. And if you're truly stuck, post something on the community, tweet about it, use the AskForce hashtag. Somebody's bound to pick that up pretty quickly and get an answer. I've done that a few times. Posted some questions on the answers board, tweeted about it, and within minutes you get a few answers. And I usually give it a little while. I check out all the answers I get, test them out in my sandbox, of course.
Right.
And I've never gotten an answer that did not solve my problem. But almost every single time I get multiple flavors of an answer.
Right.
So there's more than one way to solve any problem, and the community at large knows all of them. It's pretty amazing.
That is absolutely true, and I've had a similar experience many times over, where I encountered a challenge. I was scratching my head. I'm like, I am completely stumped, and the answer is probably really obvious, but I have absolutely no clue, and it's really frustrating. So I would post it in the success community and then take a screenshot and post it on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and inevitably, within usually 15 to 30 minutes, I will have one, if not multiple, responses from really smart people who really know what they're talking about. And I was just, each time it blew me away.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And the community is just awesome. And it's part of what I love about being involved in the Salesforce platform is the community, because it's a remarkable network, a support system to help anyone learn, grow, develop their own career, and really take it wherever they want to.
That's really so true. I mean, the directions and the possibilities are just about as unlimited with your career as what you can do on the platform.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Eric, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. Again, you're my first guest, and you made this a breeze for me. And I just hope that it was just as rewarding for you. And I hope to have you again on at some point in the future. And hopefully, I'll even fine tune my own interviewing skills so it'll be a more entertaining, insightful, and educational interview next time.
Thanks for having me, David. I'm honored to be your first guest.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to seeing who else you feature coming up soon.
You bet. All right, Eric. Talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Brainiate Show. Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to any resources referenced in this podcast. Also, don't forget to head over to Brainiate.com to subscribe to the Brainiate blog, where I regularly share Salesforce-related tips and tricks to help you become a Salesforce rockstar.